All right, let's talk about one of the most misunderstood mental health conditions out there, schizophrenia. Today, we're going to bust some major myths, separate the facts from the fiction, and get to the truth of what this illness is really all about. Let's get right into it.
So I want to ask you something. When you hear that word schizophrenia, what's the first image that pops into your head? Just, think about it for a second.
If you thought of something like a violent person with multiple personalities, well, you're definitely not alone. I mean, for decades, that's the image that movies and TV shows have drilled into our heads, right? But that stereotype, it's not just wrong, it's actually really damaging.
So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to peel back all those layers of misinformation. We'll get into the facts, the science, and, most importantly, the actual human experience behind the diagnosis.
And, getting this right really matters. Here in the US, about 1% of the population has schizophrenia. Now, that might not sound like a huge number, but it means millions of people, our family, our friends, our neighbors, are dealing with not just the illness, but the stigma that comes with it.
Okay, so let's dive right into the deep end and tackle the biggest myth of them all, this idea that schizophrenia means having a split personality. This is probably the most common and the most harmful misconception out there.
The crazy thing is, the confusion kind of starts with the name itself. The word schizophrenia comes from two Greek words, schizin, which means to split, and phren, which means mind. But, and this is a huge but, the psychiatrist who came up with the name, Eugene Bleuler, wasn't talking about a split personality at all.
Okay, so this is the absolute key difference. The split in schizophrenia is a split from reality. It's not a split identity. That's a completely different and way rarer condition called dissociative identity disorder, or DID. With schizophrenia, the person is still themselves. It's their connection to the world around them that gets fractured.
All right, let's move on to the next myth. And this is one that has caused a ton of pain over the years. It's the question of blame. For centuries, people have been trying to figure out who or what is at fault. And wow, if you look at this timeline, you can see what a roller coaster of misunderstanding this has been. I mean, we've gone from blaming demons and curses to early scientific ideas. But then you get to the middle of the 20th century, and this incredibly influential theory from Sigmund Freud started pointing the finger at parents, especially mothers. That idea caused generations of families so much unnecessary guilt and suffering.
So let's be absolutely crystal clear about this. Those theories based on blame were just wrong. Schizophrenia is not a character flaw. It's not the result of bad parenting. It is a complex illness, and it is nobody's fault.
So, if we throw out all that blame, what are we left with? Well, we're left with the science. The modern understanding is that this is really about a disruption happening inside the brain itself.
Yeah, the reality is, there's no single smoking gun here. Scientists now think it's more like a perfect storm, a really complex mix of factors. Sure, genetics can play a part, it does run in some families, but you also have to consider things like environment, subtle differences in how the brain is structured, and a really big one, brain chemistry. They're all pieces of this giant puzzle.
Let's zoom in on that brain chemistry piece for a second. The main person of interest, if you will, is a brain chemical called dopamine. Think of dopamine as one of the brain's messengers. It helps signals get from one place to another. Right now, the leading theory is that an imbalance of dopamine, way too much in some parts of the brain and not enough in others, is a major driver of the symptoms.
So look, if you want to boil all that complicated science down to one simple idea, it's this. The brain's communication system gets its signals crossed. It struggles to sort through and make sense of all the information coming in, which leads to a really distorted view of reality.
Okay, so we've talked about the brain and the biology, but what does all of this actually feel like for the person going through it? Well, for many, the experience has been described as a kind of waking nightmare.
I mean, can you even imagine not being able to trust what you see or hear, or even what you think? It must be absolutely terrifying and so lonely. For many people with this illness, that's just their daily reality.
There's this author and law professor, Elin Sachs, who actually lives with schizophrenia herself, and she puts it perfectly. She calls her experience a waking nightmare, which is such a powerful way to help us understand the kind of internal chaos the illness can create.
Okay, so when doctors talk about this, you'll hear them use a kind of confusing term, positive symptoms. Now, positive here does not mean good. Not at all. It means these are experiences that are added to someone's reality. Things that are present for them, but aren't for everyone else.
So what's a classic example of a positive symptom? Delusions. And we're not just talking about a simple misunderstanding. A delusion is a false belief that is held with absolute conviction, no matter what. And you can't reason someone out of it. It's not about logic. For them, it's 100% real.
And these delusions can show up in all sorts of ways. Someone might have grandiose delusions, where they believe they have superpowers or that they've been chosen by God for a special mission. Or they could have delusions of identification, believing they're actually a famous person from history. But, delusions are only part of the story. Another major positive symptom is hallucinations, perceiving things that aren't actually there. The most common kind are auditory hallucinations, like hearing voices that might be critical or might even give commands. And to the person hearing them, those voices are completely real.
All right, so let's pull all these threads together. What does this all mean? What's the big picture here when we think about schizophrenia and the people who live with it every day?
Look, if there is one thing you walk away with today, I hope it's this. Schizophrenia is a disease of the brain. It is not a flaw in someone's character, it is not a moral failing, and it is absolutely not anyone's fault. It's a biological illness, pure and simple.
I love this quote we came across because it just completely shifts your perspective. It says, people with mental illness are brave soldiers, really. They fight their illness every day in all of the settings of their lives. When you think about it that way, it's clear that managing an illness like this takes an incredible amount of strength and courage.
And that really brings us to the final and maybe the most important question of all. Now that we've cleared away some of the myths and replaced them with facts, the real work starts. How do we take this new understanding and turn it into real compassion? How can we all learn to look past the diagnosis and truly see the brave, complex human being who's fighting a battle we may never fully understand?